Bibles, turn to 1 Kings chapter 3. So last week we saw where Solomon, he loves the Lord, he burnt offerings to God. God came to him in a dream, asked me anything, Solomon, what can I do for you? And Solomon very humbly asks for wisdom, for the ability to discern when people come to him with a question. He's got to make a judgment. He's got to make a ruling, and he wants to do so that would edify God and the people of God. No one like him before and none since. 7 billion people in the world today, and not one of them has the same amount of wisdom that Solomon had. That's by the word of God. Solomon's wisdom I kind of equate with like Samson's strength. So we all have a degree of strength. We walk, we can lift certain things up, but we can all become stronger and walk a little faster if we wanted to. We can become more athletic, so to speak. You can lift weights, you can start jogging, doing sprints, and you will get faster and you will get stronger. Right? Up to a certain level. But there are some people who can do the same amount that you do, who are professional athletes, and they just seem to be better at it. There's something even above and beyond whatever you do in your ritual that they do, but they're just better at it. They're stronger, there's more strength. David had 30 mighty men. There's 3 that attained greatness, but the other 3 were still mighty men that did a lot of deeds, which were greater than all the other troops, but not even some of the 30 attained to what the 3 could do. Above and beyond all of them was Samson. His strength came from God. It was above and beyond anyone else. Whatever, he was just a regular man, maybe an athletic man at that, but his strength and ability, people who came from God. And so the Philistines, after he killed 1,000 Philistines with a jawbone, said, man, Delilah, where's the source of his strength? That's not natural what he can do. Find the source of his strength so we can defeat our enemy. And Delilah did that. Solomon is going to have a source of wisdom that is beyond anyone else's ability to reason, to discern, because it comes from God. But you and I can have some of that wisdom and even more of that. In the next couple of weeks, I want to define what that wisdom is and how we can get it, how we can receive more wisdom from God, because I believe we are going to need it. You're going to need to understand, to discern what I should do or what I shouldn't do. You're not going to be able to discern just because you see it on CNN, if that's where you're getting your truth from. You might have to make a discernment that God is telling you to do, or what right and wrong is. That's what Solomon is going to show us today. He is going to, it's his very first, after God has given him wisdom, he is going to show us all what godly wisdom looks like in action. And so 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 16, 2 women who were harlots or prostitutes came to the king and stood before him. And one woman said, "O my lord, this woman and I live in the same house, and I gave birth to a child while she was in the house. And it happened on the 3rd day after I gave birth, this woman also gave birth to a child, and we were both together. There was no stranger with us in the house, only the 2 of us in the house. And this woman's son died in the night because she lay on it. So she arose in the middle of the night, took his son from beside me while your maidservant slept, and laid him in her bosom and laid her dead son in mine. And when I rose in the morning to nurse my son, behold, he was dead. But when I looked at him carefully in the morning, he was not my son whom I had born. Then the other woman said, No, the living one is my son, and the dead one is your son. But the first woman said, No, the dead one is your son, and the living one is my son. Thus they spoke before the king. So Solomon is sitting on a throne. And there are all kinds of advisors and priests and dignitaries around. I'm sure there's people every day, a constant flow of people bringing him gifts. We know they brought him gold and silver and precious stones, slaves. Lots of things came to Solomon. But it's interesting that he took the time to judge 2 prostitutes. I mean, to me, you would think, oh, they're just prostitutes. Just go on your way, handle it yourselves. But this was God's people, and there was a system there to handle things. And they would have went to maybe the lower courts, other judges, and nobody could make a determination who was telling the truth. She says this is mine, she says it's mine. How can you, there's nobody else there. There's no other way, no other evidence to lean one side or the other who is telling the truth. No way of discerning truth in the matter. Solomon and all of his court now has heard these women, and now they're arguing back and forth. You can almost hear the tension as they're pointing, no, it's mine, no, it's mine, back and forth. You ever have kids do that? No, he started, no, he started. It's just constant. You don't really know who did. But how would you get to the truth? This is what Solomon did. Solomon said, one of you says, this is my son who is living, and your son is dead. And the other one of you says, no, your son's the dead one, and mine is the living one. The king said, get me a sword. So they brought a sword before the king. And the king said, divide the living child in 2, and give half to the one and half to the other. Then the woman whose child was the living one spoke to the king, for she was deeply stirred over her son, and said, O my lord, give her the living child, and by no means kill him. But the other woman said, he shall neither be mine nor yours. Divide him in half. Then the king answered and said, give the first woman the living child, and by no means kill him. She is his mother. When all Israel heard of the judgment which the king had handed down, they feared the king, for they saw that the wisdom of God was in him to administer justice. Have you ever heard the saying, possession is 9/10 of the law? You ever heard that statement? The reason they say that is because if there's 2 people who have an item or a situation and one person has that item, it's easier to maintain that possession. It's difficult for the judge to take it away from that person and give it to the other person, all things being equal. So there was a very famous court case in American history about 150 years ago, one that everyone's heard of. The Hatfields and the McCoys. Floyd Hatfield had a pig that the McCoys said belonged to them. And so it went before a judge. And Floyd said, no, this is my pig. And the McCoy said, no, that's our pig, he stole it. He said, no, I've had that pig ever since whenever. No, you didn't, you stole it. And so no way of discerning who was telling the truth. And so the judge said, well, possession, 9/10 of the law. And he gave the favor to George Hatfield. You saw how well that went. 50 years of killing each other because supposedly it started from that incident. What is the fair way of dealing with that situation? Is there a compromise you can make? Now, with the Hatfield and McCoys, I suppose they could have split the pig in half and given each a half a pig. It's better than no pig, right? But if you were the true owner of the pig, is that justice? Not in my book. If that belonged to me, I want the whole pig. It belongs to me. He's lying, right? But there's no way of being able to tell it. How about a child, then? What is it Solomon is doing? Now think, these 2 women are arguing back and forth. See, there's several hundred people gathered around, they're all listening, wondering what's going to happen, and finally Solomon stands up and says, hey, you say this and you say that, bring me a sword. That's interesting, bring an object. I'd imagine they're all thinking, what's he going to do with the sword? What possible thing would the king want with a sword? It's almost like a hush over the crowd as somebody says, here's a sword, sire. Cut the child in half and give half to each. That's the only fair way of doing business. What was he doing? He had no intention of cutting that child in half, never did. But there's something he had to discern the truth in. It is our motivation. Why did one want to keep the child over another one? One did it out of greed, out of pride, out of arrogance, out of selfishness. The other one out of love. That was her child. I was in the room when Linda had all 7 of our children. And I can tell you that instant they had that child, you look at that child, there's a love connection there. There's just something about that, that's yours. You made that child, you know. And there's, the mother and child have a different connection than siblings have, than grandparents can love the child, but it's not the same as the parent. It just isn't. And Solomon would have known that. Everyone knows that, but Solomon needed to invoke something so drastic, so hideous, that something's going to come out with the truth. And so the first woman, of course, says, don't harm the child. I'll do anything. No, spare his life. Give her to the other. I'd rather see him alive and in somebody else's hands than with him. Now, Solomon, I suppose, could have said, let's compromise. I don't know who's telling the truth, so you have him for 1 week, and you have him for 1 week. Every other week you get to exchange, 50-50. You're living in the same house anyway. Would that have been a good compromise? Not if I was, I wanted to say the dad, okay? But not if I was the mother. If I was the mother, no, that's my child. I don't want somebody else raising my child half the time. Can you imagine the weirdness that would be for the son, for the boy growing up? I got 2 moms. I understand the different, you don't know who the dad is sometimes in some of these people, but 2 moms, it just don't happen. And that's how he'd been raised. If Solomon would have done that. So compromise is not justice. Compromise is not righteousness or fairness. Not in certain situations. This an obvious one. No other testing, no DNA test, no blood work, no evidence. Solomon had to discern what truth was. And when he comes up with this solution of cutting the child in half and invokes the truth, everyone in the court understood that the king did the right thing. The king has godly wisdom. Nobody else would have come up with that solution to that problem. And that first act that is recorded of godly wisdom shows that he can discern really the innermost nugget of truth from someone. Israel heard about it and they feared Solomon for this. Wisdom was of God, just like Samson's strength was from God. Solomon's wisdom is recognized as being more than anyone else ever had. And we'll see later on, people from all over the world came to hear and listen to Solomon with his wisdom. Why would people be afraid of Solomon and his wisdom? Are they afraid of the truth? I went to a class in law enforcement, a 40-hour class, all-week class, that taught me how to do investigations where I could tell when somebody was lying. It was about 90-95% accurate. And there's a list of questions. When people come in, I could give a list of questions. And so it's not what they say all the time, because they're always going to, both women said the same thing, right? So it's not what they say, but sometimes it's how they say it. It's sometimes their tone of voice. It's sometimes a mannerism. So everybody knows if they look up and to the left, they're lying. Don't even worry about that. You talk to people now, they're like, no, I didn't take the pig. The pig was always blind. Well, they won't look, they won't go up and to the left. They've already read that. Everybody knows that. So there's lots of other ways. So I'm just telling you that to tell you, I know if you're telling me. Do you guys all tithe? Never mind. Anyway, Solomon was able to get to it. That caused a little bit of fear. Because if you're one of those guys who always got their way in court or could bully your way through, now he did this for 2 prostitutes. Certainly everyone else is going to receive equal justice under Solomon. That's a good thing to fear. Like fearing God is a good thing to fear. The awesomeness of his wisdom. So I want to study wisdom for the next couple of weeks. And I want to let you know first that there's more than one type of wisdom in the world. more than one type of wisdom available to us. There's heavenly wisdom and there's earthly wisdom. Wisdom that comes from God and wisdom that our flesh goes after. It started in the Garden of Eden, Genesis chapter 3. God told them, you eat anything you want, do whatever you want. Everything I made is beautiful. I love everything. Everything is good. In fact, very good. Just don't eat of that. And now the serpent comes by. And Adam and Eve are in the middle of the garden, but the serpent comes by and says to Eve, did God really say you couldn't? And her response to the serpent is, yes, we may eat fruit from all the trees in the garden, but God did say to us, we cannot eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden. We cannot even touch it, or we will die. And Satan responded to the woman and said, you will not certainly die, for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God. You will know both good and evil. So the woman had to make a decision. She had to make a discernment. Should I listen to what God said and not eat? Or should we listen to what the world says and take part so we can be more like God? Not good discernment there. She took of the fruit of the tree. She found that it was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, it says. So she took some and ate it, and then gave some to her husband, who was with her, and he ate it. Then both of their eyes were opened. At one time, Adam and Eve had godly wisdom. That's all they had. There was nothing in the world but godly wisdom. When they allowed sin, when they decided to follow the path of sin, and now sin is in all mankind, now there's a different type of wisdom. It's not a good wisdom. It's evil. But it's the stuff our flesh looks towards. Our study of wisdom today is going to end at Proverbs chapter 8. Wisdom is going to be personified. Solomon, the wisest man, no other man before Solomon, no other person after Solomon has the wisdom that God gave him, just like Samson's strength. Solomon had. And so when Solomon writes these things, I think we need to pay attention to what he's writing. I think the church lacks wisdom. There's a number of reasons why we lack wisdom. But we all have a degree of wisdom. You've made some decisions which shows that you're on the path of godly wisdom. But you can have more. In the next couple of weeks we'll look at defining it and how you can get more, okay? Proverbs 8. Wisdom. Does not wisdom call out? Does not wisdom raise her voice? Wisdom is feminine. At the highest point along the way where the paths meet, she takes her stand beside the gate, leading into the city. At the entrance, she cries aloud, to you I call out. I raise my voice to all mankind. So God's wisdom is pointing out to all mankind. It's there for everyone. It's there for the taking, but we don't necessarily go that route. Standing at the gate is a picture. It's a word picture for us. Do you remember Absalom? He stood at the gate, and that's where all the men who were wise, the old men, would stay at the gate and make judgments for people. If people want a land deal or to witness a situation or they had a problem, those are the people you asked first. And Absalom was one of them. And if somebody came through and went, oh, you want to talk to my dad, King David? He's busy. How can I help you? Let me judge this for you. And so that's what he did at the city gate. And so she's saying wisdom is there at this gate. But it's for all who enter into that gate. It's for all mankind. Wisdom is saying, you who are simple, gain wisdom, gain prudence, gain understanding. You who are foolish, set your hearts on it. Now what he's saying about being simple and being foolish is people who do not fear God. people who are making the decisions from their flesh. Those are simple. Those are people who are foolish. There is no God but yourself. Listen, I have trustworthy things to say. I open my lips to speak what is right. My mouth speaks what is truth, for my lips detest wickedness. All the words of my mouth are just. None of them is crooked or perverse. To the discerning, all of them, all of my words are right. They are upright to those who have found knowledge. Some people accept the knowledge of God and the wisdom of God, and some people are going to reject. In fact, most people reject anything about God. His word, His salvation, His forgiveness, the things that are right and holy, sanctified. Okay? Wisdom. You being in this room tells me you all have a degree of wisdom. Godly wisdom to be here. You've made decisions in the first place. Choose my instruction, wisdom says, instead of silver. Knowledge rather than choice gold. For wisdom is more precious than rubies, and nothing you desire can compare with her. I, wisdom, dwell together with prudence. Meaning, it's like James says, I don't want to just be a man of faith, I want to be a doer of faith. Solomon can't just have all the wisdom in the world from God and then not make a decision that's going to help people. Why have it and not be prudent about it? That's the doing of your wisdom. So wisdom says, I, wisdom, dwell together with prudence or understanding. I possess knowledge and discretion. To fear God is to hate evil. I hate pride and arrogance. I hate evil behavior and perverse speech. Counsel and sound judgment are mine. I have insight. I have power. You don't really equate wisdom with power, but is exactly that. But it's not maybe what you think. I love those who love me, and those who seek me find me. That's exactly what Jesus said about seeking and finding. With me are riches and honor, enduring wealth and prosperity. My fruit is better than fine gold. What I yield surpasses choice silver. I walk in the way of righteousness, along the path of justice, bestowing a rich inheritance on those who love me and making their treasuries full. He is not talking about wealth. He's not talking about a checking account, a savings account, a 401k, or any of that. He's talking about the things that the rust cannot attack, or fire, or moth eat. He's talking about everlasting riches. People with wisdom, that's what you seek. Everlasting things, not temporal things, not things of the flesh. The Lord God Himself brought me forth as the first of His works, before His deeds of old. I was formed long ages ago at the very beginning, when the world came to be. Before God said, let there be light, there is already wisdom. I mean, that is an attribute of God. So certainly wisdom went. And so when we look at the things, as Paul says, no one is with excuse not to know God. You just have to look at His creation and you can see the invisible attributes of God. How wise God's wisdom was in all of creation. When there were no watery depths, I was given birth. When there were no springs overflowing with water, before the mountains were settled in place, before the hills, I was given birth. Before God made the world or its fields or any of the dust of the earth, I was there when He set the heavens in place, when He marked out the horizon on the face of the deep, when He established the clouds above and fixed securely the fountains of the deep, when He gave the sea its boundary so the waters would not overstep His command, and when God marked out the foundations of the earth, I was constantly at His side. I was filled with delight day after day, rejoicing always in God's presence, rejoicing in His whole world and delighting in mankind. Again, God created all those things and said it was good. Wisdom was all part of the creation. Now listen, my children, listen to me. Blessed are those who keep my ways. Listen to my instruction and be wise. Do not disregard it. Blessed are those who listen to me, watching daily at my doors, waiting at my doorway. Those who find me will find life and receive favor from the Lord. But those who fail to find me harm themselves. All who hate me love death. So wisdom is not just something you have by decisions you made. Wisdom is also something you can find, and there's deeper parts of it. In fact, in the book of Revelations, when he says the number 666, that is the Antichrist, is that correct? Everyone knows the mark of the beast is 666. But you remember what he says? Those of you who have wisdom and understanding will get that, will understand what that mark means. No one in 2,000 years and 7 billion people later have enough wisdom to know what that number means. Is that correct? So that's telling me we have a ways to go to get there. That's telling me we can have more wisdom. And we're going to look at those kind of things in the next couple of weeks. So it'd be very wise for you to come back next Sunday. Amen. God bless you.